And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
And I am J.C. Kenney, and I am ready to take a trip in the Wayback Machine because we have a fabulous guest from a way far away talking about something a long time ago. So I think, Sarah, it's time to get bookish.
Yes, we're going across the pond today, which is super
Yes.
exciting. JC and I were just saying that this is our first guest that is joining us all the way from the UK. So it's super late for Jack Anderson, who is here to talk with us about his brand new novel, The Return of Moriarty. We're going to be talking Sherlock. We're going to be talking all of the good Holmes lore that is out there. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
We're really, really excited to be able to have this conversation about your
Yeah.
newest book that's out in the world. This isn't your first writing project that you've published, so I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, what brought you to writing in general, what drew you to the mystery genre, and how Moriarty became your focus.
Yeah, it's a pretty roundabout, it's a pretty circuitous story. So it started with mystery novels when I was very, very young. So I think Sherlock Holmes was actually the first proper book series that I was raised on
Oh, wow.
being read to, and then read myself. So I very much started there, and then I went on a very circuitous route with writing. When I was 10 years old, I've been writing since about then.
Nice.
I wrote a spy novel around that time when I was about 11, which is one of the worst researched pieces of fiction I've ever seen in my life. And so then I kept writing, and originally I actually got a bit of notoriety on the internet writing on a subreddit called No Sleep, which is kind of a large writing subreddit on there, a story called The Left Right Game, which got enough kind of notoriety online that it was what allowed me to pursue writing as a natural career, which has
Oh,
been
wow.
fantastic for now. Like, just always just kind of trying to keep that going. And then that placed me very much on a horror track for a while. But I actually said this to some people that throughout that whole time, I always had about 20% of my brain just passively was always working on locked room manor house murder mysteries, just even when I wasn't doing anything. I used to do murder mystery dinner parties for my friends. I was the
Oh,
nerd who
Fun.
would write them
you wrote
in
them?
high school.
Wow.
I wrote two. They were too difficult, and maybe not because they were intricate and clever, but they were fairly opaque. They were just hard to figure out, and maybe just a vehicle for me to stand up at the end and reveal how it was done, and be the detective in the room. So maybe quite self-serving. Um, and then I realized that I was just constantly thinking about the mystery genre, even though I was writing in horror. And I did just get in touch with my agent and say, I'd love to just write mystery and pivot a little bit into mystery. And we talked about it, and then Sherlock Holmes and that universe came back up again. And it was just in the course of a conversation. And that was when I kind of pitched the idea of this story of following Moriarty, which is something which has actually over the years always been something that's occurred to me as something I'd love to explore. And I was lucky enough that they said write 10,000 words on it and see if you realize it's a terrible idea. And luckily it kind of just just continued on. So it's been a very circuitous route from loving mysteries as a child and growing up with them back into writing The Return of Moriarty. Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is so cool. And before we get too far, we also want to say hi to our folks who are chiming in. We've got Sarah Fritzman saying hello. We've got the Professional Bookworm saying good afternoon, everyone. In Jack's case, it's good evening, but hey, whatever. DHB, happy Thursday. Farmhouse Reader says hi, all. And hey, we've gone international. Yes, we have. And Alma Collins says hello from North Central Arkansas. She was washing dishes and heard somebody talking. So there we go.
Alma was waiting in line for us, and I do want to give
Yeah.
and Alma a quick shout out because you guys will remember we did our giveaway with our last episode, and I think the new process works, so that's fabulous going forward. And Alma just happened to be our winner, so congratulations to Alma.
Cheers, Alma. Yeah. So, now on that happy note, Jack, one of the things that I'm curious about is, well, I'm curious about a lot of things with regard to this particular book, The Return to Moriarty. So, before we jump headlong into it, give us a little setup. Tell us a little bit about this particular story.
Sure. So I think the story makes no bones about how it begins, which is that it's kind of an alternate timeline that splits off from the Reichenbach Falls and Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty's final battle at the peak of Reichenbach Falls. And it takes the story in a separate direction where Sherlock Holmes perishes in the falls and Moriarty, grievously injured, clambers out and is alive. And it almost is an alternate history. Weirdly enough, it's odd to say alternate history because it's fiction, but this feels so baked into literary history that it almost feels historical. It's an alternate history where Sherlock Holmes dies and Moriarty survives, but of course he's grievously wounded. His entire empire has just been taken down by a single man. He has no resources, and he's a wanted man as well. And so he adopts an identity and goes off on a path to try and rebuild what he once had. And at the same time, a medical student called Clara Mendel comes back from a 6-year absence from her family home, which is this manor house in Bavaria. And she comes back to find essentially her house in a little bit of uproar, and the noble family who she is related to living in a bit of uproar as well. But one thing that has brought them together is this very charismatic guest who is now staying with them, Hugo Stram, who seems to have really worked his way in with this rich family and seems liked by everyone. And it's about her and Stram kind of being pulled together by circumstance as the house is rocked by a theft of a precious heirloom. And it's about Clara discovering the secrets of this man Hugo Stram and hopefully surviving the things that she discovers.
Oof, what a setup. And when you were telling us that you wrote the like murder party dinner theater solutions, there is a moment in kind of like in the introductory evidentiary files that were given where the I can't remember. It's like somebody is kind of figuring out how Moriarty survived this encounter with where he was nursed back to health with this doctor, and all like the switches that were going on, and I was just like, this writing is so intelligent and so it's so puzzling that the atmosphere of Sherlock feels very much alive. And how did you capture that? What was your process for kind of breathing life into 1890s Bavaria? Because I don't know much about 1890s Bavaria, so.
Yeah, I had to learn a lot about 1890s Bavaria. And so now I know a little bit more. I think that's a really good point, and I really appreciate you saying that. Replicating the Sherlockian vibe was very important to me. And also, I think that's an aspect of the tone of the book, which I kind of really wanted to bring in, that Moriarty is a much more morally dubious character and an immoral character. And so it was very easy for me sometimes to fall into the idea that that the world was going to be gritty as well. And the world was going to be morally dark. But actually, I think one of the things about this book that I wanted to capture was that this is Moriarty thrown into a Sherlock Holmes mystery. He's not been thrown into he's not this dark character who's been thrown into a dark mystery. There's almost a kind of fun, I'd say, juxtaposition of this master criminal who was thrown into something that Sherlock Holmes would have been thrown into, which, sometimes has kind of humor in it because it's a bit of a mismatch with his personality that it's this dark character who is facing something which I really wanted to feel like it could have been a Sherlock Holmes adventure, and that there's also this kind of sadness that Sherlock Holmes never lived to solve it, and so it falls down to this morally dubious guy. So capturing the sense of Sherlock Holmes and those stories does have a sense of whimsy to it, and it's a sense of almost unabashed uh, puzzle box nature. It wears that on its sleeve, and so that was the sort of stuff that I really wanted to keep alive, because to an extent the juxtaposition of having this character who is, I think, morally pretty, insubstantial morals would be, a very charitable way of putting it. Um, faced with a world that, this is Sherlock Holmes's world. This is the world that it has been for, all the books that have come before the final problem, and so making sure that it was still that world, and that it sadly just didn't have a Sherlock Holmes in it anymore, which is a really sad opening, really a sad premise, was really important to me. So yeah, I definitely, in those first chapters especially, wanted to establish, this is the whimsy that you expect. It doesn't have its main character anymore, to an extent. Yeah.
So, along that line, one of the things you talked about a couple of different times there is that Moriarty is he's for my money one of the great bad guys of English literature. You don't have Holmes without Moriarty. I mean, yes, you kind of do, but I mean, Moriarty, he was so intelligent and well, not just intelligent, brilliant, and such a great bad guy. But yet, when we think about all the new stories that have been written over the last half century or so, or last 25 years, they've, pretty much everything makes me think of Holmes. You went to Moriarty. What drew you to James rather than Sherlock?
I genuinely think it was just a thought I had years and years ago when I was probably late teens, early 20s, which stuck with me, which was the idea that it would be really interesting if Moriarty survived, because and that I thought about ages ago, and the feeling I had there was he'd crawl out of the Reichenbach Falls. He'd be a wanted man. He'd be completely ruined. He'd have had his entire empire dismantled. And from that point on, it's very interesting that he just kind of has to pick himself up and pick a direction and go and go that way. It's almost kind of a soul searching trip across Europe is the only thing that's really left for him to do, which I think is a very interesting thing about this guy picking what he does next. It almost feels like a billionaire from today having everything ripped away from them, presumed dead, etc., and then starting again on the bottom floor, and then having to decide, well, what do I do next? Do I go and try to build up my billions again? Do I, take a year and figure out what I want? And so that's one of the things about it that I found really interesting. And the second part of it is that Moriarty has cast such a strange spell on me, and I think a lot of the reading public, because originally, and he appears obviously in later books, but originally James Moriarty appears the final problem is a really short Sherlock Holmes story, and it's because we have all this authority of Sherlock Holmes talking about Moriarty in that book and saying what an amazing, intelligent, brilliant mind he is, that and we hear it from the authority Sherlock Holmes, that we all get kind of so shocked. We go, well, then this guy must be the greatest villain of all kind. But he actually doesn't appear that much in Sherlock Holmes canon, and it's quite strange. But he's almost like Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Hopkins has
Hmm.
6 minutes of screen time, but is the star of the show. He has that same Moriarty has that same effect. The amount that he actually appears leaves so much room for creation and so much room for exploration. And he's so iconic, but he actually isn't fleshed out much at all, and that's not a bad thing. And I certainly don't think it was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's intention, because at that time Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was trying to create a neat way to essentially kill off Sherlock Holmes, and it was only later that he brought Holmes back and then kind of backfilled in some more stories of Moriarty, even which in those he stays as mysterious. So it was the chance to flesh him out, and also just the idea of where would Moriarty go from there has kind of stuck with me for a decade now before I was actually able to write this project.
Oh, wow. And we have one of our viewers, the fashionable bookworm, said or calling Moriarty the Napoleon of crime, which I think that that's a really
Mm.
eloquent way of putting it, because he is this
Mm.
big little figure, I guess, in the lore of and what you say about like history, being a part of literary history. I remember what I went to the Sherlock Holmes Museum on Baker Street, and
Mm.
the way that they spoke about him, I like turned to my husband and was like, these people know that Sherlock is a fictional character, don't they?
Yeah.
Because of just like how real they made it all seem. So
Mm.
it's such a huge undertaking, which you do so well. Like the way that you construct the book, I think, is so. Already had said like the writing is so intelligent, but it just like it's to me reads like a case file at the opening. But then we get to meet Clara, so I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about her role, her foil to Hugo, but where they kind of have common ground with one another.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think one of the big parts of that was, so the structure of the book is, it's written as a collection of letters and
Hmm.
journals, etc. So it's an epistolary novel, which I did know that term ages ago when I was in English class, but I forgot it. And it was only later, after I'd finished this book, that someone said, "Oh, so it's an epistolary novel," and I had to quickly nod and say, "Yes, yes,
Learn
I
something new
I knew
every
that."
day.
Sure.
Yeah. And so it's written in that kind of perspective, which was really did come out of, I've kind of set myself a challenge with these books that I really want to stick to the canon as much as possible, um, and try and just kind of pay homage and live in the tone of what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did. And to an extent, a big part of that is that these stories, the original stories, are sort of John Watson's journal. I mean, it's a dressed up journal. It's
Mhm.
definitely a story that he's writing, but it is him retelling something. It's not from a third person perspective. It's him and Holmes, and so a big part of how I wanted to structure this book was to do it that way, and it ended up pulling in a lot more perspectives than I even anticipated starting out, which I really really like. And Clara serves as, I would say, the John Watson of this book, who has her journal, which takes up a big part of this story, where she meets Hugo Stram, and Clara Mendel is this medical student who is very very pioneering and has gone to Copenhagen to become a doctor, and has almost, I'd say, reluctantly come back to meet her slightly ailing family, this sort of failing noble house. And I would say, she's just kind of whip smart enough to pique Hugo Stram's interest, which puts her in both an incredibly interesting, advantageous position, and also an incredibly dangerous position
Mhm.
as well, because this is a man whose interest you could do well just to not pique and sidle on by him. And I also wanted her to be a character who would almost be a good Watson to Moriarty, by which I mean, I think if Watson was the companion to Moriarty, I think he'd quit day one. Watson's an incredibly morally unimpeachable and loyal character, and that's something that really comes out in the canon. That he's almost one of the things I love about Watson is that there's so many times where he seems genuinely shocked that the villains have done what they've done. Like Holmes will tell him this villain committed this crime, and John Watson will be almost shocked to know that anyone would commit a crime like that. He's puzzled by villainy almost, and I wanted a character who was a little bit more dialed in and a little bit closer almost to the sort of Holmesian um, drive to solve the puzzle, and just a little bit sharper and a bit more jaded than Watson. Someone who essentially could hang out with Moriarty while this mystery was solved and not immediately slam the door in his face. Which I really like. It's something about creating a kind of Watson for Moriarty was really, really fun.
So, and that sounds, yeah, that sounds so much fun, because that's you're as a reader of Holmes, it took me a long time before I finally clued in. It's like, oh yeah, Watson's the one telling the story. It's not Holmes himself. So, but I guess one question. Unfortunately, we're running short of time here. But can you talk a little bit about writing within this larger established canon? On the one hand, I would think, boy, you got to be really careful you don't mess something up, especially setting, with this being an historical as opposed to setting something in the modern world. But on the other hand, I'd imagine if you're clearly a fan, it'd be a lot of fun too. So could you talk a little bit about that?
It's what the very interesting thing is, and I would hate to put Sir Arthur Conan Doyle on blast here, and I may have to a bit, but there is a very interesting aspect of course, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had a bit of a complicated relationship with Sherlock Holmes and writing Sherlock Holmes. It was something which, there's a reason that the Reichenbach Falls happened, and that for a little brief amount of time he did try to end the character. So not only is it's quite interesting that not only am I trying to keep in the canon of everything, but also there are small things that come up. For example, in the final problem, Watson refers to Moriarty's brother as Colonel James Moriarty, and then a later book refers to Professor Moriarty as Professor James Moriarty, which has led to, for anyone taking this canon as seriously as possible to have to accept that there are two people in this family called James and they're brothers, and it's those small things where he has such an extensive universe, and then there are also some things where he kind of got through these premises quite quickly, and there are some kind of errors and factual and date-based errors he's made. And I think weirdly that it's the fun of the challenge has been I know the canon very well, and I love that world, but also the things that I've really had fun like running into other times where there's just a little inconsistency, and the question is, do I have an answer to why that inconsistency exists in the world, or do I just have to kind of see if I can walk on by it and just cover my eyes and pretend not to notice? So it's really interesting. There's something actually very sprawling and kind of like artistically patchwork about some aspects of the canon. So that's actually been interesting, not just the exploration, but the small pitfalls of where this kind of huge canon has been a little bit patched together has also been fascinating. So yeah, it's all been really interesting, to be honest.
And before we forget, and I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, the book is not out quite yet. But folks, so instead of hitting the buy button, you're going to hit the pre-order button, because when does it come out?
I believe it's October 21st. Oh my goodness, 10th.
Now I had the 7th.
That might
I'm
be
so sorry.
that might be for we may have like different because like I feel like
I
the
have
UK does it differently. We got
That's
different
absolutely my bad.
systems.
No, Ben, it will be October 7th. I'm so sorry. Yes, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
And folks, so just make it easy on yourselves. Just wait till we're done because we got a few more fun things to talk about. But then, as soon as we're done, then go hit your pre-order buttons.
Because this is a for anybody who even remotely loves the world of Sherlock Holmes, like you're going to be pulled right in. And we have Alma in the chat saying your book sounds amazing, Jack. So, and Alma,
Yeah.
it is. It's like it's for me. It felt like I was reading a like masterpiece mystery movie. Like it was just so like great at setting the scene. So I know that we have the book, the release itself to look forward to. Is this a part of a series? Are there going to be more that we get to look forward to? What kind of other, what's on the horizon for you, Jack, as for writing projects?
Yeah, so this is a part of currently I have a second book for this
Nice.
they've asked me to put out, which I've actually just finished writing, which has been really really great,
Fabulous.
and which takes the character a little bit closer to your side of the Atlantic as well, which is again a very fun thing because as Sherlock Holmes, absolutely amazing character, but he loved London, and he very rarely left London and the surrounding counties, and a great thing about Moriarty is that London's probably one of the few places he can't go to right now, which has lended itself to some really interesting. It's almost the Sherlock Holmes canon gets to go on tour a little bit slightly with this. So yeah, I'm working on that. I'm really happy with it, but yeah, it's really great to be talking about this book as well and just
Fabulous.
seeing it go out into the world.
And
Yeah,
the cover is
absolutely.
stunning. It's beautiful. It's what a it's gonna be a hit. I like it's so fun and just
And
like
so
the
along,
place
yeah.
or the places that we get to visit because where you mentioned we're staying away from London and we get to see the 1890s from other like areas of the world that I don't know that there's a lot of historical fiction being written about those areas as well. Like, but maybe I could be shading Bavaria horribly, but I don't know like a lot of literature that's in like the U.S. market that is focused on that time and enlightening us. So that was fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Jack, one of the things after everybody reads this book and after they fall in love with it, they're going to need to keep up with you. So, where can folks find you online? How can they kind of keep in touch and keep up to date with what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I'm mostly on Instagram, which is at Jack Ted Anderson, and that's probably mostly where I can be found. I post from there quite a lot. Yeah, that's my main
Okay.
social.
Fabulous.
Awesome.
And for folks, we have Jack's socials in our show notes so that you can get them from there. We like to ask this, Jack, of all of our guests that are visiting us. Any recommendations of what are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you reading? Any entertainment that you would like to pass on to us, especially since you guys, like, you've got such great TV. I'm obsessed with BritBox, so you've got so many awesome mystery shows.
From a British mystery show, and this may be quite popular. I've recently started rewatching Inside Number Nine. I don't know if that's a
Ooh.
thing of where you
Yes.
guys are.
Mm-hmm.
Number 9.
Inside Number Nine has been my as I've it's the only show I've ever rewatched, and it's a 9-season show, which for a British TV show is 4 times as long as any show we make should be. But yeah, Inside Number Nine, very interesting. 2 amazing show creators, really creative. It's an anthology series of dark stories with kind of dark twists, but they always have a sense of humor to them. There's a very storied history with the guys who make it that leads into kind of sketch comedy in England, so they're kind of well-known names. But yeah, I'd recommend Inside Number Nine for anyone
Ooh.
interested in checking a new thing out.
I am adding that to my list.
Yeah. How about you, Sarah?
What have I consumed in the days that since we last met? Well, I do
Yeah.
have a podcast recommendation for folks, true crime, of course. It is called Culpable, and it is basically a journalist that goes back to these cases that were pretty botched by law enforcement when they were first investigated, and kind of lays out like this is how this was handled, and now we have to really like dive back into the case file, talking to people, interviewing them. Really, really fascinating. I think that one's 3 seasons. I think the new season just came out. I love that storytelling. And in line of Moriarty, there is a manga series that I think, Jack, you just like made the connection for me as to why there are 2 brothers that are like in the
Yes.
series. They like switch identities, or like one kind of kills the other one, or something happens in the manga. I was like, oh well, that's why, because there were like 2 Jameses having different roles. So I've read a couple of the volumes, and there is an anime of it, and it's interesting. So JC, what about you?
So I am going to go to France and go to Acorn TV with the Madame Blanc mysteries. Cozy mystery, gorgeous setting, features a couple of a small group of expat Brits who are living in France now. The main character, her name is Jean White. She is an art collector, an art expert, and she gets called into a number of mysteries because of various things, of artifacts and things like that. It's just so much fun. And, you know, certain people, when you get to my age, it's always nice to see people my age on the screen doing good stuff. So the Madame Blanc mysteries. And I also am going to throw out there, if you haven't watched it yet, here in the States on CBS, there's Watson, which is the new show that came out last fall starring Morris Chestnut as Dr. John Watson, and set in Pittsburgh. So it's kind of a Holmes thing with a whole new twist that also has a contemporary Moriarty in it also. So there you go to kind of wrap things up and bring it all back together.
That's that circular journey that you were talking about, Jack, where your first mystery series was Sherlock, and now you've entered into the world and you're a part of it now,
Yeah.
which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations on a phenomenal book. Like it's so good. I'm
you
so
so much.
excited for readers to be able to enjoy it. We have a couple comments about Madame Blanc in the chat. JC, fashionable bookworm, saying love Madame Blanc and is glad that it's been renewed. And Alma says loved watching Watson. So interesting. So we've got some great
there you go.
recommendations. You guys know Jack is on Instagram. You can follow him there for updates about what's going on in his world. Jack, thank you so much for sharing a moment with us today. We really appreciate you staying up late and coming to us from across the pond. It was absolutely fabulous chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been really great to chat to you.
Thank you. And for folks, we are going to be back next week. We have a show on Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard. We'll be here live. You could also check our episodes on Substack as well. But we really appreciate our wonderful audience who is here with us for the show. And those of you watching after the fact, we hope that you had a great time listening to Jack Anderson and the return of Moriarty. Until we see you all again, stay bookish, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.